Oh, that's true. That's true.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the December 5th meeting of HR 169 Task Force to order. Elizabeth, will you call the roll?
Carrie Robeson. Here. Cynthia Bryant. Dr. Dooms. Dr. Hordbelsky. Here. Lisa. Here. Dr. Fountain.
Here.
Mr. Fleming.
Here.
Dr. Arbuthnot. Dr. Young. Dr. Labriere.
Here.
Dr. Singh.
Present.
Dr. Uller.
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. Mr. Roche.
Here.
Dr. Rusev. Mr. Herbold.
Here.
We have-
All right, thank you. All right, next agenda item is approval of the minutes from the October meeting. So Elizabeth sent the minutes out to everybody was it earlier this week. Do I have a motion for minute approval? Right?
Second.
All right, second, there we go. All right, so next agenda item is discussion of report recommendations. So I sent all of you, I think this was right before Thanksgiving, a list of the recommendations that we had discussed as a group at the October meeting. And there was some comments back and forth. So I just want to go through the recommendations that I sent out and we can discuss those. And if that's something we want to continue to pursue and add any other ones that we may want to bring to the attention of the group. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and start with what I have in front of me. The first one is provide ORP eligibility to certain employees within LCTCS. And this is the public institutions of higher education versus post-secondary institutions. And this is really just an LCTCS issue, but it affects five colleges. I think that's one that I think we all agree on, but Gina, I'll let you answer anything else that you have to say about it.
And I did provide Matt with this, two different options that we had looked at in the past was either currently it states higher ed and instead, the membership eligibility could be higher ed and post-secondary because those 5 colleges are established as post-secondary. So just that those two terminologies mean the same thing and then we could offer it. So I think that's probably the simplest way to fix it.
We'll just go into, the recommendation would be to go into the current statute and add post-secondary institution to it. Okay. And I made in my notes, I saw 2 instances, Trey, this is something I guess you can confirm, but I have it in RS 11-921 and 925. It's the initial ORP like overview, and then I think the eligibility. There's
25 is eligibility.
Yeah.
But we could put it in post just to be clear.
Okay. I didn't want there to be like, oh, this one says that. And, okay. Any other comment on that one? Okay. Easy enough. All right. Next, have increased the irrevocable decision time of 5 years that was passed this past year to 7 years to align with tenured decisions. This is one, let's see, I think Dr. Arter, you'd mentioned this one. I know, Kenny, this is something that obviously if it did come, there would be an actuarial note on it, but we don't know. I guess it'd be kind of similar to this past note in a way.
Yeah, it would be very similar to the past note. I think, I mean, I listened to the meeting since I wasn't here, and Trey comment on the fact that there would be a cost. It would be very difficult to put an actual number to it, and so that's be relatively generic language in the actuarial note. I would guess it would look very much like the one for last change.
Okay. All right. Doctor, anything to add to this one?
No, I think that it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
We had obviously talked about the 5 to 7, but the very simple fact was, if this is to target our tenure track line to stay and maintain our talent in the state. At 3.5 years, they know if they're on the right path. At somewhere in that 6 to 6.5 years, they've been guaranteed that path. So that's why the 5 is an odd number.
And the 5 was there because it was there already for, I guess, for
Probably just a nice number.
staff in general,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just a nice
But
number,
just
but
not-
if
I
you're,
have a question on. So when we go through the list, decide, how are we gonna decide what ends up in the final?
Yeah, so.
I guess there's some ideas that I'm not gonna object to, but I would abstain if we're gonna.
Yeah, so my thought on this is, as I was telling Dr. Singh, as we go through these recommendations, like I wanna, there's ones that are out here, gonna hash them out more today to see if it's, okay, is this the path we wanna go on? And then send out a draft report next week, a week before our final meeting, to get consideration on, and then I think we would just approve either what's there or take away from it at that point. Like, I think the time to add would be, we would have already reached that path, would be my thoughts, but I'm open to suggestions on how to handle it, but it would be, we'd really try to do it as, you know, this is what we think as a task force that the recommendations to go to House retirement should be.
So for each individual item, to Trey's point, would you be able to abstain on some but not others? Or do we have like a vote on the whole draft at the end of the meeting, in which case you might need to abstain on the whole report?
Yeah, we can go recommendation by recommendation, and then,
I think it would be fair to do recommendation by recommendation, and it's fair to say 17 in present or 13 in present.
yeah,
Support of 9 of 13.
okay,
You don't even have to put individual names if you don't want to. You
Right.
just, so that the next group that reads the report recognizes this is unanimous or still up in the air.
okay,
Yeah, all of the recommendations are not gonna have an equal likelihood of being approved. That's just
right,
understandable.
okay. There'll be a lot of votes next week. In a couple of weeks, you're right. Yes, well,
We record them on.
If we do this, they'll know if they watch the.
yeah, we can,
Exactly. This is live streamed, so
Okay.
they'll be able to
Yeah.
check that.
but I'll check with Uma on that just to be safe of how we have to rush it. Anything else for the 5 to 7 year increase? Okay. Alright. Next one, ORP membership participation in TRSL board, either through subcommittee, faculty, senate, or both. I know we had a lot of discussion about this one last time, so Dr. Singh, I'll let you, I know this is something that you brought up, so I'll let you kind of talk through what you're thinking on this.
So I think it's a extremely valuable idea. And we had a brief discussion yesterday, Trey, me and Matt, on this issue. This was one of the issues we were discussing. And it seems that TRSL is receptive about this idea to have some sort of an ORP advisory board, which probably doesn't have any voting power, but will have a official comment period in the official meetings.
Yeah.
So things which I'm slightly worried about is how this advisory board will form and structure, at least for the first time, because it's extremely difficult to run an election as TRSL board does. So maybe you can tell how the TRSL board is formed from the regular members, and then we can try to mirror the ORP.
So we have different districts throughout the state, then we have superintendent representative, we have higher ed representative and retirees. and we also have some ex officios. They serve 4-year terms. We use an election vendor based on whatever their constituency group is. We have a vote, and then if necessary, we have a runoff, and whoever gets the most votes is on the board.
Did you say that was a 4-year term?
Yes.
And you cycle like a third off at over,
It's. Yeah, it's close to that.
do something.
Sometimes we have 3, sometimes 2. So but yeah, it's a cycle.
Is it weighted in any sort of way, so that a certain number of employees of the institutions make up a portion of the board as opposed to managers?
Well, we have, not really, it's geographical areas.
Yeah,
So, it's really, the superintendents have their own group. School food service workers have their own group, and then higher ed has their own, and then everybody else, every other employee of the school board that happens to live in a geographic region, anybody is eligible to run, and
I have a question, and I have been paying attention during all of the meetings, but we talk about TRSL, but sometimes we talk about it as the defined benefit plan, and sometimes we talk about the entity that oversees the defined benefit plan and the distribution of the ORP, right? Can TRSL, the entity that oversees everything, reach out to members who are on ORP as well as who are on the defined benefit plan for the voting? Is that possible?
so ORP participants, because they're not members, they are not eligible to vote. So
I guess Phil is asking,
But could you reach out to them for these other seats, for these advisory seats? Is that viable?
I guess we could, I think Dr. Singh was thinking of a more structured way of the ORP participants. If you want to
sure,
explain,
so I think
we could certainly send something out.
yeah.
So, but,
Phil and I also had some discussion. So like, just to summarize, in the last meeting, one of the thoughts was that maybe the Association of Louisiana Faculty Senates can help in this process somehow. I discussed with Phil. We are both regular attendees of that association. We meet twice a year in LSU Alexandria. The problem with that organization is voluntary. Sometimes people show up, sometimes people don't show up, and it doesn't have the representation from the entire state. So some senates are more active than others. So it will be unfair to go through that. What we were thinking was probably like for the first time when we are forming this group and we have to do it quickly, which means in 6 months, let us say. The task force recommends or strongly recommends that each university systems, faculty or staff senates, send one person. Let us say LSUNM is directed in this strong recommendation. You have to give an ORP participant who is not going to switch to TRSL and who has been in the ORP for the last 10 years, so that person has stakes in the system. We leave it to the university to decide how to run that election, whether to run that election or to just appoint that person. And Phil and I were discussing earlier, there are 28 institutions in the state, and I think like we'll probably get half of the responses. So we are looking at, we are looking at probably 12 or 14 members to show up. And we can put some sort of requirements that this person should have tenure of. And if this informal group, and that person can speak up in these official meetings. This is one thought. Without running the election directly, like giving that responsibilities to the universities. But then the question comes, ORP participants who are not in the universities, who are not faculty or staff in universities, how will they be represented? So I think we need some help there, how to bring the entire cohort together. So
And the idea that we were bouncing back and forth, hypothetically, on the extremes could result in nobody coming. But we wouldn't want to force anything, but alternatively, 28 people coming. Which may like overwhelm the process, and I don't know if we got to a certain point, if we would want to have some sort of cap. Make it no more than 10 people or something, I don't know.
I want to add, I completely agree with everything they just said, except for I would make the cap at like 5.
Well, yeah,
Because the same kind of mentality that we took to find individuals like us to represent our systems is the same mentality. I think go up to the presidents or the directors of the systems, one representative per, plus, like you're saying, the auxiliary or non-faculty side would be a 4th person, and if there's another category, would be a 5th person. I'm a believer in odd numbered committees, just in case you were actually voting. While I was listening, I apologize. I get on people for having their head down on the phone, but if we're in another situation, looks like y'all's board has 12 members. 5 serve on the board because of the nature of the office that they hold. 4 are ex officio, and 1 is appointed by the House Speaker. So y'all, does that sound right? Do you sound like you're a board of 12?
17.
17, so there's 5 more from somewhere coming in that flavor. Yeah, but for our representative, I think a board of some sort of voice, no more than like 5. We don't need the floodgates.
So
Where we don't
maybe
need
one from each system with.
one from each system,
Yeah,
and then make sure the representation by like say 2 more from the non faculty side, the staff side, that need to be sure that if they weren't reflected of the first system pick, they're reflected in the other side.
So my thought to that, and I agree. A faculty rep from each system senate, so I get you 4. And then a non-faculty member from each system plus regents gets you 9. So,
yeah,
There's an odd number.
and then everybody in higher ed is represented at that point. And so, and you know, it can be,
So that,
that can be the starting mechanism of it. And then,
and so you put that on the responsibility goes to the system offices.
Correct.
Which will, they'll speak to the administrations at their, within their system. And if there is any breakdown, even with a few universities, each system will still likely be represented in this case.
correct.
Yeah.
Because it would be, I mean, my thought would be, like on the faculty senate side, that system rep is talking to the faculty senates within the
They will
system.
break it down.
And so, there's some sort of communication occurring. And that they're bringing forth their body.
so that will cover all groups?
Yeah.
These 9?
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily, I'm in K-12.
Yeah.
It's a very small number.
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
don't know
true.
What the number is, but.
300 or so.
I think
But
we
that's
should
a
cover
population that needs to be represented,
It
so
does,
it needs
yeah.
to be added.
Yeah,
K-12 systems are there?
There's 69 school systems, but
Yeah.
then that's, I don't know, charters, how they participate, but.
I think I said.
yeah, you did. I was about to pull it up. Trying to talk through this already. Not about this issue, but just in general. That's true. Forgot about K-12 ORP.
They're all people who started in college, but now being K-12.
So this 9th person, which Matt, you were suggesting from Board of Regents, this will be the Board of Regent appointee, or will it be the?
It could be. I mean, I guess it-
382 active.
okay. I mean, it could be Regents just appoints a person that is within. Regents has 3 programs. There's not that many ORPs at Regents, so that could be lumped together with Regents in K-12. Is that?
There could either be a rotating appointment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Okay.
I'm just curious what the purpose and responsibilities would be of this, because I'm
fine.
not sure what type of
What are the duties?
teeth it's gonna actually have.
Right.
Besides maybe an avenue to complain.
That's one of my questions. So what power does this have? It's just a group of people complaining.
Right.
One avenue
We need
to
a voting
provide a
power.
voice would be a start.
I think we talked about that last, like, in reality, what teeth do you have? We did mention that, and I think, and I know we use the word optics, and some of us don't like the word optics, but there is value to the effort, as well as a lot of it is window dressing and optics, and there might be true. But at least it opens the door of line of communication, and I think it would diminish the, excuse me, the rumors, the naysayers and the misinformation, right? So whether or not you have, yes, voting power would be lovely, but this is a start. And there is, as long as you put the right people in the room that recognize it's not a complaint fest, that you're trying to have a contribution, then those persons shouldn't be appointed forward if they, they haven't been vetted for that, but
I
they're.
hear you, but I think more teeth is, if the board is already 17 members, why couldn't you add just 2 ORP seats? Since the teachers board is making decisions for ORP members, they're still outnumbered, but at least they're around the table of the ones that are actually making the decision.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way.
I think Catherine, I mentioned last time, you'd have to find an ORP member who's really be a fiduciary to the defined
You
benefit
find them in
system.
TRSL, you're definitely gonna find them in ORP.
But Trey, I have a question there. So even those, the TRSL board members who get elected, they act as fiduciaries, right?
Yes,
So so I'm just asking, I'm sorry for this question, but why do you think like ORP members are not mature enough financially that they cannot act like fiduciaries?
they'd be acting like fiduciaries to a plan that the $27 billion plan that they're getting nothing out of.
But the same can be said about the TRSL board. Like, some people can say that those people, why they're acting fiduciaries for the ORP members in a way.
So their actions for the ORP members are really selecting vendors. I see, that's their role. The vendors themselves are fiduciaries for the ORP members and their funds and their benefits.
So the TRSL board members' responsibility stops at choosing the vendors, and that's all.
Well, we also, we hire our consultant to monitor and make sure the providers are meeting their duties, they're providing the education, they're providing good investment options. So, but we're not selecting any investment options. We're reviewing what the providers put forward. For instance, if there's a particular investment that's doing poorly, our consultant will put it on a watch list. And if it stays on that watch list and doesn't improve over time, they'll make suggestions to the provider that they need to replace it because it's not performing well versus the other investment possibilities in that asset class. And another thing they monitor is making sure that they're in the right share class. So we have enough, I guess, maybe Tia can talk about this. I know they're here. I'm not sure what you have to do to move up in share class, but the fees go down. I think it has to do with the amount of assets. So that's what our consultant is. So we use them to make sure, to check the vendors and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. So that's really the extent of what the board does.
But still, there's over 6,000 ORP participants that don't have representation. That's my concern.
Well, where we're at though today is, we're in a negotiation dilemma because if we come to the decision in the majority vote in favor of voting members, and then down the road, this is not picked up, then we have no members. If we say non-voting members, maybe we left something on the table that we could have had. And if we say voting members, but if not that, then this, then people go, oh, well, we can do this because this is their second choice. So I guess the decision is what would be the best strategy going forward when the people that read this report decide whether or not they want to move forward with it.
I think, Trey, you are the best person to answer this. And thank you so much for this really very insightful explanation. Now I understand the issue much more clearly. What do you think would TRSL board accept as the maximum like just an ORP advisory vote, which has no voting power, no veto power also, just a official comment period, or something more is possible.
I guess. I'm not really sure. I know our board would be open to having this group come and at least express concerns or, not really, I don't want to say, not really complain, but express frustrations that they see. I mean, it's not, what we wouldn't want is a large group of people saying, I want to invest in windmills and wind power. And so I need a fund in this lineup that just does that. Like, that's not productive. So I guess what kind of ideas are y'all thinking that this group would bring to the board?
Can I add I think might be an olive branch. I love the idea of having a committee of whatever. Looks like we need minimum of 10 now, because we definitely forgot K through 12. And then of that committee, there can be a representation, right? There can be a voice or a two. Everybody can come to the meeting, right? Public meeting, public body, but have a voice so you won't have that concern that all of a sudden you get like a lot of loud complainers or a lot of pulse that kind of takes over the value or the trend of the meetings. I completely respect that. So potentially, like you're saying, what kind of voices would they want? Well, there could be within the body an elected voice that will be the line of communication. Doesn't mean everybody can't participate and be present, but that therefore you don't have a room of 17 plus a room of 10 that may come in kind of strong.
Like I said, it's a public meeting. The 10 are welcome. I guess my thing is, what kind of input do y'all think this group would be giving or want to give?
So yeah, please continue.
So one thing that I see, for 10 years, ORP participants got below Social Security percentage contributed to their account. No one cared. No one represented ORP. There needs to be somebody representing those members to ensure that they don't fall back into that kind of situation. Now, granted, there's legislation, but that's because ORP people fought for it. And they had to fight with their legislators. It shouldn't have to be that way. There should be representation. It's over 6,000 people that are not represented.
So I think this is for the first time probably, like when we have an active participation from the ORP members and TRSL has listened and the board is listening. So something like this, it will be like on a slow cooker now. Like we will have similar people probably who are enthusiastic, who have stakes in the system, who can point out some of the fault lines in the system. Let us say, well, this is the investment which is given to us, but it's not even following. This has so much of tracking error. So can you please fix that? Or can you talk to the consultant? Why this happened, and probably can we fix that in future? So that we don't have to wait for the consultant to come to you and flag something, but maybe those who are more active ORP participants, they can just help the consultant in the process.
Can we write the recommendation this way? And this is kind of playing off of what Aaron suggested. Have an advisory board, and a paper tiger is still there, and it's still, people get awareness of it. But if anyone from that board is willing to step up and take the fiduciary responsibility, then she or he could be the voting member on the board, if anyone is willing to step up. But the board would still exist in an advisory capacity.
It would still, well, I guess that would take legislative change to create another seat on the TRSL.
So there's that
So
aspect.
let's
But
split
that can be a recommendation.
let's split it into two recommendations.
Yes.
Let's do the advisory board that we're talking about that doesn't have a vote. And let's do a second recommendation that advisory board has a seat on the TRSL.
That makes sense.
And then that way we can at least get the advisory thing started. The other might take a little bit longer, but then we'd have both still out there.
Yeah.
we'll just put that one too.
One into two.
Yep, one and two, okay. All right, anything else on membership participation?
So how will we proceed with the first option? So once the committee committee will direct the university systems, so the task force will direct or strongly recommend.
It would it would be a recommendation that this occur, I think is where we go, that this should be created. And then we'll list out who the members would be and where they'd be selected from. And then once selected, I guess we could put in there, like, you know, the system president submit. I guess this could be a regents kind of coordinated thing, like. submit it to the-
Just like we did.
Yeah, just for the,
Like this.
submit to the commissioner who your people are, and then call a meeting by, you know, whatever, we pick a date. That gets started. And then, you know, they would meet and then send someone into a teacher's meeting. The representative just be like, look, here's what we've done, you know, and then obviously teachers would be aware of that because this should be part of it. So I think that's how we could start this. And just say, you know, I mean, we could start it for, if you pick someone, it's a 2-year term, or, you know, if we're cool with 2 years just to get it started, because the legislative piece may not occur this year because it's a fiscal session, but it could potentially do the next year. So at least give some time, and then another group can be selected from there. So that would be my initial thoughts on this. And then it'd be up to that group to actually start meeting and determine how often they want to meet and all that stuff.
I don't think that's a bad idea in the sense that in one essence, if the group, the advisory board really truly has a vested interest in it and merit as far as things to bring to the table, they will take the initiative to hold those meetings, and they will take initiative to educate themselves and be current and up to date. So therefore, if we don't get the invite to the table, and when they do get the invite for the table, they'll be ready and prepared. If it falls to the wayside, then you're right about complaining about windmills.
I guess, how specific do you want to be on how, let's say some ORP gets a board member. How is that person gonna be elected? Would it be,
I mean, my thought would be it's elected just like the representative for colleges and universities it'd be through the ORP membership at that point.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation.
fine, I just know Dr. Singh's, one of his concerns is you don't want a new ORP person. If you open it up to everybody and a new person wins, that's your representative.
Do you have limits for the TRSL people? Do they have to have so much time in the system before they can get elected?
I should know the answer.
I mean, it's not like a body, if that's what the people want, then that's what the people want.
See,
But-
that's the thing.
Could there be certain, you know, restrictions, like you're only eligible if you have 10 years in or what have you, and then everybody.
I guess I'm thinking more, if you want somebody that had at least 7, so you know they're not switching.
Yeah.
Because you don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Well, I think like this time period was only to make sure that the person is not going to switch. If he's,
Yeah, so
if he's in this advisory board or later in the board, he has his stakes throughout the system. He's not leaving this thing. He knows what that person is doing.
They wouldn't
Somebody's
even-
gonna run their first year, but if you got somebody that's been in an ORP for 5 years and runs and gets on the board and decides, I'm getting tenure and I wanna switch.
Yeah, so I think we
But
should
if-
have at least 7.
But if, and the more the better, because they're more invested, but the 7 really doesn't. The 7-year mark is the date at which they cannot switch again.
Right.
So I could be, you know, employed in the system for 10 years, but only in ORP for 3 because I switched a few years ago, but I can't switch again. So the 7 might be tied to the employment length more than how long you've been with one of the retirement plans.
So I think we
Just
should,
something to think about.
yeah, so we should have something like 7 years in ORP. Not just employment.
I'm reading through your, is it your election policy?
I think,
I don't see anything on years, like, of active, but, I mean, if you have, in theory, if you have one or two people that run through this, I mean, they have to put a platform out there of what they're gonna do, so, and you would know their background, so, you know, you get to pick if somebody runs with 10 years or somebody runs with 2, you know, that's up for that election population to decide.
But before the recent legislation, somebody that was in TRSL would have a 5-year window to switch to ORP. But no ORPs would ever be in that pool in the current rule set because they couldn't switch. Within that first short hire window, they could switch, but after that, up until the new legislation, they couldn't switch. So everybody that's eligible under those rules is vested in TRSL. They can't switch back under the old rules. Now that they can, you might even want to update that. Because I could be in TRSL for 1 year because I've been here 22 years, but I'm switching this year. And now I'm eligible to be that member.
Given Trey more work, really didn't much around it.
But I think that, I mean, that's.
Just added a pivot.
I think for that, which I think is outside of the task force,
Yeah.
but,
But
I mean-
for parity, just,
but that goes to an electorate, like,
yeah.
the electorate can decide who they want at that point. I don't want to take anybody out of potentially running that wants to, but may do a good job
I don't
regardless.
want to take anybody out, but also. What's the point if you elect somebody and they switch and just. Now there is no ORP.
Yeah,
Participant.
yeah.
It's,
Well,
That you've created a vacancy.
well, you could write something along the lines of that seat is only if you remain in ORP. If you switch to TRSL, we have to have another election.
runner up.
Yeah.
Women voting. Not anything.
well, having some minimum requirements to be that member is not a bad idea.
Okay.
In our parish, to be on our K-12 system board, you have to be 18. That's it. That's all you have to be is 18 years old, and we would all kind of like to see a little bit more structure there. So maybe we could model that.
And I would leave that up to, I guess, your legal counsel, like. Y'all as a group to decide eligibility, like, is that something that is allowable in a way? Like, I mean, you set the policy. Or it could be set in law too, if that's
the statute, right? And for all our current board members, it's in statute.
okay. Okay, we'll just add that, we can add that as a recommendation piece, if it is to go through statute. They need to have this many years in ORP, something like that,
Yeah.
that takes care of everybody, okay. Okay.
Or Gina's idea, that you let anybody run and
If a vacancy occurred, then,
it would create a vacancy if you switch.
Yeah.
It have to be replaced.
okay,
And so this election will run through for all ORP participants in the state?
I guess it depends on how it's worded. We have 6,000 active. We have, I don't know how many thousands that they participated at some point, and then I'm guessing those are the people that left the state. So their money is still in the program, but they're not here, so
I would say actives.
probably say,
to be safe.
Well,
activism.
Yeah.
yeah, because they would be here to actually make some type of.
Yeah,
And I think we will weed out a 99.999% of the opportunity of anybody once they have to agree to that fiduciary requirement, right? The verbiage is pretty scary.
Yeah.
The verbiage is pretty like, you really need to want to be invested in being a member of this board. I'm looking at the pretty little picture of, you want to learn more at the bottom of the website here. You want to learn about your fiduciary responsibility and prudent man rule, and there's a whole bunch of things that that's gonna weed out a lot of people.
You want to be invested to the point of willing to be sued.
Yeah,
That's what it
weed
is.
out a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know if it's our job to say who should be on it. I'm just throwing out the things y'all should think about when you write up the recommendation.
Yeah. Anybody else on this one? I figured this would lead to the most discussion. Sure, that's the last.
I would just like to request Trey to tell us what is to be written, which will go through easily from the board. So I know you are giving Matt all this job, but probably I think you have to write that recommendation part. Like what should be
The
the
problem with that is I don't know what our board would think about that. Until our board sees an actual recommendation, I don't know what they think. Or if they would want me drafting how to put another person on their board.
We can,
We have the current rules and standards that they're using for TRSL members. We can
yeah,
model that.
I think we just follow that for now.
We can throw that in the chat GPT and say rewrite it for an ORP rep.
It's really, if you did it the same, there's. I think the statute provides for what creates a vacancy. You just add a person and add that if they switch, if the elected more person switches, that creates a vacancy.
Yeah.
In that position.
Yeah. Yep. All right, next on here is increase ORP vendors. This was something, Dr. Singh, I think this would have been one of yours, but current law has that there shall be no more than 3 vendors. I think as Trey discussed with us, there's always been just 3 that have applied. But I think the proposed recommendation was if we open it up to more than 3, we may only get 3 and that's fine, but do we want to open it up just for potential to see what's out there? And so I welcome comment on that or questions, anything on that.
Can I ask, is there a downfall to having more than 3 vendors? Financially, is it?
It's so. Consultant that we hire. Their fees are less the fewer vendors there are because there's fewer people for them to look at. It's not a large increase in cost, but that's it.
They're gonna make their money whether or not they have this many people or this many people, they'll increase their fees.
It's how many vendors do we have to monitor and how many, so if all the vendors have different platforms. And so if you're monitoring 3 different platforms, they're gonna charge us more to report on 3 vendors. If we had a single vendor, they're just looking at that vendor's investments. And really it takes them a lot less time. They're doing a third of the work, so they're not gonna charge us as much. It's not, we don't save a third of the cost, but it comes down to some.
Your vendor's fees are also going to be based on assets under management. So if it's spread across more vendors, then you're likely to have individual management fees being higher as well.
Correct. So I was following.
So the reason I requested if we can look at increasing the number of vendors was to get better vendors and. I think it will be, we have seen when we were looking at earlier tables that some universities have at least only have not 2 vendors or even 1 vendor for ORP. But these are really good vendors, not the ones, so. But we have some good vendors too, but like these are also other good vendors which are there, which are much more competitive in fees and so on. I think like what we really need is a really good vendor, like even if it's just 1. Vanguard is not in business for this, but let us say Vanguard was there and everyone can invest in those index funds. Probably everyone will be happy that we won't be, I don't want to use any negative word, but scammed by some vendors. So I think the point is to have better options. If it comes by decreasing or like maybe that strategy can also work. And I agree, I think increasing the vendors will increase the cost. They'll have fewer stakes. So they'll have to make their own money, so what we would ideally like is great vendor with reduced cost. I don't know how to achieve it.
I can tell you, if the number changes, then we'll put out an SFP and see what responses we get. That's really all we can do.
But we still put out a response and we still picked the three best that we think were the best vendors that have applied, correct?
Yes.
So
Typically-
if there is a better one out there and they have applied for us
Typically, when we
We would
send
have
it
a
out, we
conversation.
get responses from the three vendors that we have.
and nobody else,
Every now and then, somebody else. Even if they're not very strong.
I'll have to check, but as far as I know, it's been just those three the last several times we get them.
So when you say you send it out, where do you send? Like maybe the campaign needs to be different.
I'm not sure where we send it out. It's industry publications. People know that it's there. I think one of the things that I mentioned last time is some vendors don't want to be a fiduciary. And so they won't do that. There are other places in the country where, so for us, the vendors pick the investment options. And there are other places where the vendors are given, these are the investments you will provide. So in that case, they are more just a record keeper. For us, they are the fiduciary, so they pick the options and they should provide what is best in class for each particular asset group, not for the participants. So it's, a lot of them like just being the bookkeeper. So if we had a different system, we picked the investment option, they would really be a record keeper and they're not a fiduciary. But we feel that it's better, it's in the interest of our participants, if the person they're investing with has a fiduciary duty to them. So that limits in some instances who wants to bid on becoming a vendor.
So can TRSL make an effort? Because I think next year we are going to have a new cycle, right, for the vendors.
I'm not sure. It's the next year or two. There will be one.
Okay, so I was thinking like if TRSL can make an effort to reach out to some more vendors. For example, like, let me not give any particular names, but there we have a vendor for 403B, a big vendor, very efficient vendor. Probably like that vendor would be attracted towards doing. I would be surprised that why such one of the biggest vendors won't take a fiduciary responsibility.
Well, the other thing is we can pick up to three. Some people will submit or have submitted years ago. We will submit to be the only vendor. It will not participate unless they get the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why we've historically we can pick up to three and we've always picked three. I don't know how long ago it was, but I know way in the past, someone submitted, if we're the only vendor, here's our proposal. If we're not the only vendor, we're not interested. So
I see.
So it could be that reason why they're not doing it, or it could be the fiduciary piece. There's nothing that says we have to pick three. We could pick one. We've always had three.
I believe I asked this before, but, and it's okay, we don't know the actual numbers, but of our three vendors, are they about evenly distributed across our 6,000, or is there one that's definitely a standout?
Stand out for the number of members.
Yeah, who we
TIA
selected,
is the biggest.
okay.
They have more
That's where I am,
than
that's where I am, but
the other two
Just-
vendors.
yeah.
I could probably, I can have those numbers.
Just a curiosity, if there really is, you know, whether or not it's just brand loyal or what the reasons are, it doesn't matter. I'm kind of in the mindset that I don't think we need to increase more than 3, but I think this conversation we're having right now is a great example why to have an ORP
I think
advisory board rep to keep
so
those
traditionally,
lines going.
I don't know, it's changed a little since COVID, but, and I don't know which vendor is which, but we had basically a high touch vendor, which works with the people. They want a lot of attention. They want people counseling them all the time. They have medium touch and they have low touch where just put the platform out there for me and I will go do it. So traditionally, and like I said, I don't know which vendor does what, but we've had a high, medium and a low touch vendor so that depending on how much involvement you want, or if you just want to go just put stuff out there and I can go online and pick it, or I want to be able to call somebody every day and ask them about my money. So it's three that we have always provided a spectrum of different.
That's a great model. I think that's a good model. So, yeah, because there are different people. People are very comfortable making decisions for themselves and people that want, you know, my quarterly visit to campus. So people want those.
I think one more aspect is simplicity. As we age up, if we have some pool of money here, some pool of money with this vendor and so on, it just creates complexity for later for the family and so on. So I believe like if we have, let us say 403B, like many of us probably participate in 403B plans too, because we know like ORP is insufficient. And maybe in 457 too, but let's leave 457 apart because it's just one vendor there, basically for us. But I think like people should have option that those who are in 403B should also be there in ORP, so that if they want to simplify their entire portfolio and just be with one, let us say with TR, ORP as well as 403B. It's much simpler for faculty who are elderly and their families later on than to manage monies with different.
Does every institution have their own 403B?
I think each system determines their own 403Bs. Because I know ours are different than LSU's because I've been in both.
And a lot of them mirror the vendors for the ORP, but
Right,
I
which
guess
is
not
also
all of them.
additional ones. Everybody has additional ones as compared to just the ORP.
So after hearing all this, is this something that we could probably get rid of this proposal? And this maybe just kind of goes under the umbrella of advisory board or something like that?
That's what I think.
Okay.
This is one of their first tests.
This is a conversation starter, but it doesn't.
We're gonna recommend who's on it, and here's your first job.
I would say that if
I'm good with all that.
if that advisory board wants an extra one, there needs to be a statutory change. So we're limited by law.
Yeah.
So.
But-
And it doesn't matter.
But that may be something that,
It would delay it a little longer if you wait.
well, that may be something that if the advisory board's in place and TRSL goes through the next, selection process, it can be evaluated after that, like let them advise based on what's out there and then we go from there.
So I think the ORP advisory board should have, I think it should be formed before these decisions are reached or whenever this bidding starts. I don't know, is it open bidding or closed bidding or?
No, it's open.
Okay.
They submit and once they submit their response, it's a public document.
So when is the next round for it to be?
A year or two. I don't.
I'm just saying, maybe we want to put a date on the membership of the advisory being formed.
I think that should
So
be,
that we are in place before that's done.
Okay.
we were discussing it a bit earlier and I think the idea was to wait till June, end of June next year, so that we know who is going to be in ORP versus not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe in July, we can give the deadline as end of July, this advisory board must form. And so that from the fall of 2025, they are in action.
Right. Something like that. Yeah, I wouldn't give like a hard date, some kind of,
That would
You
be,
can never make.
that would be plenty of time
No.
to,
like
that would be in place before the
SOP for vendors.
All right, let's see, anything else on that one?
So Matt, like, so would we say something like that when we talk about, so we are going to merge this into the task of the advisory board? Is that the kind of idea?
We'll put as, I guess, a responsibility of the advisory board to,
We will mention this in the task
Yeah.
force document that what an example of the responsibility of the advisory board can be to make recommendations on how to improve the, well, not to improve the vendors, but like how to have better
Selection.
opportunities for vendors. and
yeah,
so on.
the selection process or something like that. Okay. All right, moving on to the next one, increase information provided to ORP membership. Carrie, I'm gonna pass this along to you because I think this was something that you had mentioned at the last one. So,
And this really came out of a sense that ORP members are set aside and not, we do not, are not engaged in the same way that members of TRSL and lasers are in the decision-making in any changes that are coming out from, say, the TRSL board makes vendor selections for the ORP. Our ORP members are not necessarily notified that that's happening or the outcomes of that. There's never any change. So, you know, in a sense, that would be information that would not be usable, but having some kind of regular communication to the ORP membership as a class would be very helpful to the members in understanding what their options are, what is happening within the ORP retirement pool in Louisiana, and making decisions accordingly. For example, just hearing the discussion of 403Bs, or does the state, do we have access to that, state employees?
You have a 457.
well,
Through our system, we have.
Regents has access to both. Well, I'm sorry, Regents is 403B, but if you were in a state agency, you have 457. So Regents is a 403B.
That's something that as a member of the ORP, I've never been notified of, or it's never been discussed with me.
That wouldn't be something that we would even know about. That's your institution.
Yeah, that's an employer offering. That's
Right. But you would know about the availability of such plans and communication can say contact your for information.
Actually, we don't know what plans people have. I mean, we know that our employees can do the 457. I don't know what different school boards offer different things. I read
Each higher ed
each
system.
offers something different.
And this may be something that's unique to me as a, you know, as an oddball, because I don't have an institution that has a large number of participants in an ORP. So there is no information coming my way, at least.
Sort of from my standpoint, it just feels like, you know, TRSL, you gotta log in, you know, there's all this stuff, and your ORP, I mean, you sign up for it, and then, I mean, you know, you talk to your vendor, of course, and that's who you kind of primarily go through. But even if you had information coming out that talked about, okay, you should be thinking about these things as an ORP member, and I know that's not really the TRSL's side, but if you had a group looking at that, maybe just, you know, things to think about the ORP plan. I don't know, but I do know what you mean. You feel a bit of a stepchild because you don't have your login, you don't have, and I know why, but it's.
Right, you don't get your
I
newsletter,
don't know
and
the answer to it,
even
but-
with we can't participate in the TRSL board because we're not members. But you're still managing the ORPs, but we don't have any status.
And that goes back to what I was saying a long time ago regarding the optics, is that we, no matter who you are individually, we're still contributing to the overseer, you know, seeing of the broad branch. Financially, we're still contributing, but we don't have a direct login or conversation the same way, but we're still paying for the, you know, the personnel and the management services for so. I think that kind of goes back to always the root of the conversation.
I just don't know I don't know how much information we would have to give out.
Well, I would
and I don't, tell me if I'm going in the wrong direction, because I don't know exactly if that's what you're thinking. But I know like you get the TRSL newsletters and it's like early career, mid-career, late career, here's some training. So something along the same kind of lines of, hey, you're an ORP participant, here's some things you should consider. And maybe even suggest early career, mid-career, and late career activities that they need to be doing.
I think from our standpoint, that's the vendor's job.
You guys do get an administrative fee, so why can't you do that piece of it?
I don't think we have the expertise to tell people what, so for the blind
Give
benefit
the
payments,
advice, I'm
like, we
saying
can-
make your appointments. See what I'm saying? Like giving people the opportunity to say, hey, go and make your appointments, your early career. Here's a couple of things to consider. You could have the vendors even tell you what to put out there, or put all the vendor information, contact information out there and say, early career, mid-career, late career.
And part of it is in the same way that it is with TRSL and lasers, is just flagging for employees that this is part of your package and you should be thinking. If you are not proactive about your retirement plan, if it just sits because you're not anywhere close to retirement and you're not thinking about these things, that helps tweak in your mind that you need to be paying attention to these things. And you need to be considering what stage of your career you're in, how much money you need at retirement, the just basic information.
Very few words would need to be changed.
and I think from our standpoint, that's what the vendor is there.
So if I can say something, I think one part of the discussion here is that lack of information for new employees. Irrespective of whether the person is in defined benefits or defined contribution, there are these supplementary retirement plans which are extremely valuable from the tech side. And also, like, if people start investing early, they can really cover up a lot of the gaps which we have seen compared to other states. I think the messaging is relevant for both TRSL as well as ORP participants. If in the TRSL newsletter, let us say, there can be a statement, well, maybe your employer is offering 403B or 457 plans, and you should look into them. I don't see a harm in that. And similarly with I agree. I fully agree with you that many ORP vendors actually do a great job. When you log in, they have their retirement planning. They tell this is how you contribute, and this is where you're falling short of target. TIA does that, for example. Fidelity does that. Really good job. So I can see like how TRSL may not be able to do that kind of thing for the newsletter side. But as far as the supplementary retirement question is there, I agree. Like even I didn't know when I joined. I slowly discovered what is 403B myself and what is 457. And then I discovered like what are the real benefits of that, like that the taxable income is reduced so much. And I think there's so many benefits around which people are just not aware of. And by the time they get aware of, they have lost so many valuable years to invest in those things. So I know it's not directly related to TRSL or ORP, but like given the lack of any structure which can advise us on this, any information is going to be very valuable.
And this may get back to the training issue. The idea that this shouldn't be a decision made in a vacuum, but there should be training for participants around what these decisions mean for the participants. So maybe a quarterly newsletter or biennial newsletter or whatever is not the solution, but more information. Especially I think for ORP members, I've been an ORP member for 23 years, so I can't speak to what TRSL does or what Lasers does. But I can say that I can count on two hands the number of times anyone has reached out to me about retirement.
Right, and it's a slippery slope to make the assumptions that the vendors are doing these same services when we have those three categories of the hand-holding vendors, the medium vendors, and the you want to be self-directed vendors. I too, I'm on my 19th year. So that goes back to just that idea of Yeah, it's not your job to hold hands and teach you how to, you know, reach out to your campus's HR because you should be doing X, Y, Z. But that, hey, you're part of the system in its totality. We do pay those monthly fees to be part of the system in totality. And so it's just a couple simple verbiage changes. And we're still here. We care about your future, you know, as a member of Louisiana and the system. That's all.
And I
Not to take a responsibility to make sure that they follow through and do these things, but just a communication lines to remind you your mid-career
It
cutting.
might seem duplicative, at UL Lafayette over the last 22 years. I've heard this multiple times from my vendor and also from our HR department. But if just a quarterly message could come out from TRSL, because we do pay those fees. I mean, we're not members, but we kind of are.
Yeah.
You know, we're members with no rights. But we're kind of members because we're paying our membership fee.
We're in the backyard, but not in the house.
But I think I can understand from a risk perspective that TRSL may not be interested in providing any kind of guidance
No, not
because
guidance, just-
that's
just like-
risky for non-members to receive. But could it be part of the vendor selection, that part of the expectation of a vendor is to provide information proactively to the signatories to their agreements? So as the board is considering the selection of those vendors, one of the expectations that can be outlined is that the vendor for all of the members who sign as members of that ORP, they have to receive a minimum amount of information proactively on an annual basis.
That should be easy for even the lowest touch vendor, which is the one that I think I'm with, the one that I prefer, because I don't love salespeople. But automated emails, you know, from the vendor periodically would cover it. And if we don't read them, that's on us.
Exactly.
I mean, they are running a business too. They want our money, so they do want our contributions, so.
Could this be something that the advisory board could tell us? We want the vendors to give us this on a quarterly basis, and then we go to the vendors and say, this is what your participants expect.
Yeah,
Is that-
correct.
And they might be able to say, look, we're already doing it. Here's the proof, you know, but then the issue would be addressed.
So if is this gonna get removed as a recommendation but added to the advisory?
I'm thinking so.
list?
We're gonna
Don't
give them all
remove it because we don't have an advisory board accepted yet, so you cannot remove it until we get it to the.
Well, I'm thinking this one goes away, but it's in two different ways. Part of it goes to the advisory board. And then another part of it goes to the training,
On the one below?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
sense.
is
That
fine.
makes sense.
Put it in the training, don't put it in the training.
But I think it's also relevant for the TRSL participants, like part of it, right? Supplementary retirement is for everyone. And even TRSL participants, even though they are slightly ahead of ORP, the way the TRSL is efficiency is structured, they also would like to be in 403 or 457. But many are still not aware of that,
No,
the benefits.
I'll make this comment, Trey, you can correct it. I don't think that's a TRSL responsibility for what's available in 403 or 457. Like, that's an employer responsibility to communicate, not TRSL.
Right,
But-
it really has nothing to do with TRSL. Right.
Like, that's a,
No, it doesn't have to, but like,
Right.
given that we have such a poor ranking amongst all the states in both defined benefits and defined contributions, I think states should make an effort to give information, maybe not TRSL, but some agency in the state should give that information. Well, okay, we can't do this, but at least you can look into this. I thought that was appealing.
and I don't know if that falls within the charge of our responsibilities here, because this is ORP related, so. I agree with it, but I think that's outside of our parameters.
And I think from our standpoint, the person who has the information is the employer. It's not information that we have.
That can be part of it. We can make that part of the training recommendation too,
Yes.
just to, we can throw it out there. All right, anything else on ORP information? All right, we'll move down to training and increased information for new hires. This would be, do what I wrote for my notes. Okay. During our last discussion, there was conversation about when you're hired, there's not much information about the choices and differences, similarities for plans. So I think this is a twofold request for, number one, the HR offices to be trained on it, to have some type of pros and cons for each, or just to be more informed about it. And then for newly hired faculty or unclassified staff, that they have a video or something to watch that is put out that says, here's your DP choice, here's your ORP choice, here's what you get here's your options as an employee. And then obviously we'll add something now about just ORP membership information as well. Is there anything that we need to add to that or that needs further discussion?
One of the things I'll mention, in our district for health insurance, a few years back, we really tried to help people understand the benefits of a high deductible plan. Because so many of our teachers we saw, they grew up with this point of service copay plan, and that's just what people signed up for. And while that may be the best for your situation, you can't, again, like y'all can't tell us what's the best, route. But we partnered, our company did this thing with this thing called Jellyvision, whatever. It's kind of like the old you don't know Jack kind of thing, if y'all remember that, y'all, those of y'all my age. So it was it wasn't just this dry video, somebody talking to you. It was an interactive, you would put in information, you would do things. When I came to LSU, that could have really helped me. I had people in my office saying, man, you need to do ORP because you don't know how long you're gonna be here. I'm gonna build it, you can build your own well, do all these things. And I really wasn't thinking, 30 years down the road. So I went that route. And I think maybe if I had, and of course you can't force someone necessarily to do that, but you provide something that can really help them play scenarios and look at the options. And I just think it could be beneficial. It was really just put on the table and I had to make a decision, and it is my responsibility. And I wish I, maybe would have looked into it a little bit differently when we started, but I can see the value in not just a video of somebody sitting there dryly talking about it, but maybe something that's interactive that helps you interact with your current situation.
I completely agree, and I know I'd said something about HR before. That something that is a video or something that is repeatable and interactive, and you would take it home, you do it, at home on your laptop or whatever, versus and there's such high turnover in HR, so you never know, which flavor of, well, here's your sheets and here's your 60 days to choose kind of thing. That there would be great value to something. I don't want like Philip said about, add it to training. We know we don't want more governmental trainings. We don't need any more governmental.
Another hour when you get.
Which is last week, right? But something that was digital and something that you don't have to have taking HR's top physical time and so forth could have tremendous value. Because they're going to get the same pamphlets and they're going to hand you your papers and tell you to go home and think about it. And you don't need to add too much more burden to the HR office as hand-on, touching, but a video would be tremendous. Some sort of website links to, right, we don't need a candid speech, some cute person reading a monitor, but something additional. And have the conversation about no social security or who does contribute, doesn't. Those kind of things, links to, could be great. And that's on that informational side, because I don't know how else you train them. You just train them by being more knowledgeable.
Who's doing the training and putting all this together?
Well, I don't know. That's the next part of it. But I did want to hear from Gina and Chantel, just if you have anything to add to this, because y'all are on the HR side, so.
We do it. We handhold and we go through it. I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. It's not as simple as a video. Because do y'all know that if somebody comes in with a 1-year contract, they are not offered teachers? Not until they have 2 years and 1 day. And then you have to chase that person and find them and say, hey, you can finally do this if you didn't choose ORP. But now the recent rules have changed, they could end up changing, which is great. Because a lot of people in higher ed are hired with a 1-year contract, not thinking they're staying. And choose the ORP and then got stuck irrevocably. There are thousands of people with that scenario. So it's not just a
Build them a
simple,
flow chart.
yeah.
If you are
Well, I
a
do have
1-year
one.
employee, you
Well, I
go
have one
to the left.
I have one that I use to
If
train
you're a 10-year track, you go to the right.
because our office trains 12 HR offices out in the state. We have a flow chart. We have a very, very detailed flow chart with, I'm pretty sure Chantel and them do it as well. Might have even stole it from one.
And I went in HR when you came through, so I can't be blamed for your situation.
I made the choice. I made the choice. I'm not.
HR talk to them.
But I will say we do have the ORP versus TRSL link to their tool. And yours, when I came in, I told them we have to start pushing people to do the tool. And we're like, you really need to work the tool. Like work the tool to see the TRSL versus the ORP. And I said, don't look at the bottom line. You have to look at the monthly amount. Don't look at the account balance. So I don't know, but I will say even changing to have more time. I feel like if you say you have a 60-day deadline, they always show up on day 59, 60. Same thing with open enrollment. I had 800 transactions come in on November 15th because that was the deadline. So I think even extending the deadline is not going to help. I don't know what will help really because I haven't figured it out. Sometimes I feel like I stand on my head and I'm still not getting the message through. So I don't know. But yeah, who's gonna make all these trainings? Because we do push them to teachers' website because y'all have excellent webinars. Lasers has excellent webinars, and I don't know how often they're viewed.
So it sounds like all this stuff we're asking for already exists. It's just a communication issue, you know, which HR rep you're getting that day.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that was my point, is that if you don't need a nice movie made. But sometimes our people behind the desk would need that help too, and if they knew it. They knew which, website and links, here you go, here's your front facing list. I want you to read, go do all this, come back to see it, check in with me next week. Do your homework first, then come back to me. That, it's just coordinating it and putting it in the same space.
See, like we have a mandated, we take them hostage their first day. And they don't get to start work until they see us.
We say it's mandatory, but we don't stop.
No, like they don't get to report to work, they report to us.
So,
But I don't know if a train the trainer is maybe the better route where I know once a year there's an annual training that teachers provides, but you do have staff that come through more than once a year. So I don't know if an online train the trainer, instead of trying to read the manual where all the legalese gets confusing, might be a better
And then you
situation.
could have flow charts too,
Yeah.
for those newer people, the younger ones coming through that are more visual.
That would help.
So-
HR staff.
on this one, I'm kind of thinking there's not really any training or increased information that needs to be provided. It's just a matter of making sure it's received.
Yeah.
And streamlined potentially.
Yes, and I don't know how to write that. It's not really a recommendation. That's just
It's a talking point, but it's not a recommendation.
right. It can be noted, I guess, in a way, but this is something that,
A concern.
we recognize that a lot of information is out there. But there's concern of, I don't know if it's also as simple as, Trey, if y'all do once a year training, maybe twice a year training, or if,
Well, that once you, that's training for
HR
HR
staff.
staff.
Well, and that's what we're thinking is like maybe the HR staff need more training in order to better communicate the messaging of the choices.
And then which of those things that after the trainings would they share with the, employees across the table as far as the list of this is your to go home homework. In the report, you can have, say, we have the following 5 recommendations with additional, themes or conversations and put something like this in that additional component of
Okay,
issues, issues that were addressed.
okay, yeah, okay.
Maybe this may exist already out there, but maybe it's like a portal solution that there needs to be a sort of choke point to access the information. Whether there's a portal
I
that
think a lot of the
reflects
information is
out.
available on our website, our YouTube channel, or.
But say if you're,
Once I started looking at it, I did see it.
that's
Out there late. 20 years.
But I think if like, if you do our ORP and you are then funneled to your vendor. Or you do lasers and then you're funneled to lasers. If you do TRSL, you're funneled there, but instead having at least a way to have a choke point of information that then funnels you out, so you know where to get the information on all of the options. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
No.
like-
Yeah.
People are looking confused.
No, like, it's really just a one-stop shop, which
Right, exactly.
I think you may already have, it's just, we need to make sure people know about it more.
Make HR know
Add it to your HR checklist.
Yeah, and Gina, I can say we have other campuses under us, and what you get at one campus is different than
Exactly,
another, even though we've gotten all the same training.
And they don't report to me and I don't hire them, but I have to train them.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Responsibility
that
is
other
authority.
transparency and
Not get into
making
system
a
government.
put that recommendation. List of information would be helpful.
Yeah, it's
Well-
there and it's pretty.
You know, talking about that,
It's not bad.
it could be, and this is an IT issue, but there could be some type of acknowledgement, hey, you go to this portal and you click here, say, okay, I looked at this, I've made this decision. I've, at least took the time to go out and go to this website or whatever, and I acknowledge that I read it. Cause like, yeah, you said, HR can give you all the information in the world, but if they just throw it in the trash, it means nothing. But, I think about it from, part of the reason why we're here is retention. If somebody can look, and I don't know if this exists, but like, this is where you're going to be in X number of years in ORP. This is where you would be, and these are just scenarios. That would be eye-opening. Like if you're gonna be here a long time, go this way, if you're, but
There is something, the calculator.
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure it exists. So it's like, I'm thinking from, back 16 years ago, if I'd have gone on there and, actually known that existed and taken the time to be like, wow, maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way.
Calculator didn't exist maybe
Right, it
16
didn't
years ago.
exist, but going forward.
We do have good tools now.
Now,
Those of us that came in, a lot of that wasn't there.
Right.
Yes.
That's what's been illuminating for me and maybe for you, is I came in so long ago that now all the stuff that I wish I'd had is there.
but back
It's
then it
there
could have been
now.
on a one page, here's 5 scenarios. And that would have been eye-opening,
Right,
so,
or a one-time development of a choose your own retirement adventure
yeah.
simulation where you can plug in. There's so much of the calculators is just plugging in. You have to know, I plan to do this. I think my salary in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
my average salary is going to be. You have to plug all that in. So maybe something like that interactive tool is.
I think we can retire to I think we can apply to their newsletter too. I mean, it's there right now. A
Yeah,
lot
I
of it.
push people to apply to the newsletter all the time.
I think we've uncovered some good stuff.
So the whole point would be to be able to either some people learn what's available or reintroduce themselves to the links and the information that's available and develop a concise, whether or not, I hate to use the word handout, but a concise mechanism to share that information that can be distributed starting with HR or your welcome to employment package or whatever that is. I know it doesn't matter if we do or do not recommend to change the date of the 60 days. But just to make a quick comment, the reason why a later date is of value is if you do think you're gonna be somebody who will be here in that building in that job for 25 years, you will learn to respect your peers, to ask them to get advice from the people in your building. And you may not know them in the first couple weeks. You also may still be getting your grounds bearing for the semester and the job started. So that's the only value to procrastinating, is if they've learned, to ask others, what are you doing? What would you have done differently? If you've been here for 40 years, how would you have changed? That kind of thing. That's the only value to extending the
And
date.
new
I can
hires
say
that
that's also
acknowledges
dangerous.
the
because
overwhelming nature of it.
I hear stories all the time about people that either did drop or didn't do drop because their coworkers said, oh, drop's the greatest thing in the world. Or drop is horrible, I never should have done it, and everybody's situation is different, and taking advice from coworkers on your retirement might not be
That's usually a bad idea.
a good idea.
So let's skip the next bullet and go down to the initial decision, since it's been brought up a couple of times now. So I have been, it's currently 60 days.
60 currently.
Okay,
60 or 5 years.
60, if you do it within the 60, then you get the employee and employer contributions that have come in. If you do it after 60, you don't get the employer contributions. You get your employee. It's just if you want the employer contributions to follow you, it's got to be within the 60.
okay,
So you have until the 5 years to choose. The 60-day period is to get the employee and employer contributions.
got it.
For just those 60 days or forever in a lifetime? Because that doesn't,
60 days.
that doesn't seem very fair. If it'd be for, okay, yeah. So yeah, people
Yeah.
realize you might lose a little bit of money by being, indecisive. But
But then you don't lose everything.
because you made a joke.
If you switch, you still have that
Yeah.
small account from previous years.
I mean, I've heard different opinions on this. Is 60 appropriate, or should it be more? Or, I mean, I guess we already have more with 5, but, or is this a non-starter of a recommendation to begin with?
I say it's a non-starter because with the 60, Trey also was pointing, out about there's risk. The other risk is that you've lost investment and all this other stuff as well. So there's a lot to it. So the 60-day window, I think, is as far as you can push it. And then, especially now that you have the 5-year window, that kind of defeats the purpose of needing the 60.
There'd be a huge cost attached to moving it even another 30 days, wouldn't there? If it were to allow them to take the employer contribution as well,
It would got a huge cost. It would be a cost to the system.
Yeah.
That we'd be paying. We'd be turning over employer contributions that we're not currently turning over.
So,
I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I just think
and
that.
is this more of a just delete it and?
Yeah.
Not okay, cool. All right. Easy enough, all right.
Can I ask like who made this recommendation? Maybe that person is not present.
I think it just came up in a discussion. I don't know if anybody. I don't remember anybody specifically making it. It was just a discussion item of timing.
I know it was a question of why.
Right, the
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. And I just has my notes, it was brought up. I put it as a recommendation on there. So, but that's easy enough. Okay. Going back above that, increase employer contributions to ORP accounts. So my notes, have that, right now employees or employers make 6.2%. As we've noted through the NASRA presentation, we are among the bottom in the South. But now with the special session that's just concluded, there's a potential if the voters so choose, and the trust funds are eliminated and the money applied to the UAL, employer rates will go down, and there's a projected savings for, depending on what the legislature decides to do, a savings to employers. So with that, I think what would be in here, the recommendation would be that employers, if they are able to maintain a savings or the dollars from the savings, could use it to increase that contribution rate, which I believe we discussed last time that that's already allowed by law, that you can
So
increase more, you can add
the
more.
board would have to pass a resolution. And so if you wanted to increase the contribution rate for fiscal year 26, board would have to pass a resolution. We have to receive the resolution by June 1st. So if we got a resolution from any system on June 1st that said we're increasing it by a percentage, then that system's new rate starting July 1st of 25 would be 7.2.
Now, we all know some systems have more money than other systems. So my thought is it would be nice if the state in a whole increases the floor to at least the employee match. And then once you have that, at least everybody's on the same playing field. Because the UAL has been coming down, so there should be some pennies somewheres under some cushion somewheres to increase the employer contribution. And at least get to where we're matching some of our other SEC peers. It's just my thought.
So I'll put on my prior cap on that. So yes, the rate has been going down. However, in this past session, the savings achieved by that was not retained. So there was $30 million in savings that went elsewhere in state government. So,
But if in legislation, we have that it can't be less than 6.2, if legislation is then moved to say you should match the employee, so it goes to 8, then hopefully they also, when they cover the mandated cost, they would give the institutions the mandated cost for the 8%.
yeah,
Amen.
We really appreciate your positivity.
I agree.
Don't hold out a lot of hope.
That just does not always occur.
Yes.
I will say that both Matthew and I did make that exact suggestion multiple times.
It was actually part of the region's budget request too.
Yeah.
So, not the 8%, but at least retain savings. So,
So I have a question.
yeah,
So
go for it.
is it like, do you foresee that even if this happens where there is a 73 million estimated savings and nothing trickles down to ORP, like the institutions may just keep it to themselves and
Well,
No, it goes to the general fund.
well, there's a,
So yes, they keep it for themselves.
Okay.
this is the flow chart in itself, but so if the voters approve the constitutional amendment to liquidate the trust funds and pay the UAL, the teachers, the estimate is $73 million in savings to our education. That's essentially state general fund, which has to be appropriated by the legislature. So it's up to the legislature to decide, does higher ed keep the 73, or do we use that? Well, it's the Division of Administration creating the budget for the governor and the legislature to decide what they want to do with it. So there's a potential that the recommendation, I think it could be 2 recommendations at this point, under the umbrella of increase in contribution rates. One would be, request that any savings from a UAL payment remain in higher education, and institutions use a portion of that money to increase the employer contribution rate. The other would be that increase the floor to match what employees pay. So I think it'd just be 2. One is just an appropriation. Both are legislative. One would be appropriations, and then one is actually going through a bill specifically for that.
Say yes to both of those.
Okay.
Whatever we have to do to get it done, I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this? Kenny, would there be anything for you actuarially on that? Like,
No,
okay,
that's not, yeah, I mean, that's not.
that's just okay. I just want to make sure. Yeah. Going through what,
Trey, would that impact K-12 at all? My understanding is in the legislation, it says if they pay down unfunded accrued liability, we have to give $2,000 pay increases, 1,000 for support staff, and then any left over, they have designated how we must spend it.
Yeah.
It's not just extra money.
Correct. So
But if you mandate an increase in the minimum contribution, then
but y'all don't have, I
that flows through.
think K-12 has the same authority to increase on their own rate.
But he's getting the 6.2%, so if we increase that floor, then he would get the A, right?
So the increase in the floor, you would get the 8 is school board would have to come up with where are we gonna get the money to do that,
It's less
because
than 300.
their savings. Their savings are not there.
Right. Right, so the system would just have to absorb,
Yeah.
whatever the increase.
so that flexibility language doesn't apply to K-12.
I don't think it does.
Okay. Interesting.
We just had a thing on that other day, but if we have, they're saying 5 or 6 systems will not be whole. I can't remember the number. It's a
I thought it
handful
was
of
9.
systems. Those that
It
were
went up
not,
every day.
So, well, the Department of Ed put out some scenarios and they'll, I can't remember how many, but they have a giant spreadsheet full of scenarios. So it's, depending on which scenario you looked at, you'd have a number of schools that would either get it or have the savings to pay the full raise or not. But it's all based on a projection, based on how much money they think the treasury has now versus what they sell it for in April and give us in May. So the savings will be a certain percentage of whatever their fiscal year 26 payroll happens to be.
I think you're right about it only being a higher ed thing, because it just mentions boards and institutions, not K-12. So,
They have something separate.
Yeah.
Item.
okay. So the pulse of the committee is a recommendation to increase, but 2 different ways to go about doing it. All right, and then last on here is phased retirements for retention purposes. So I'll let Dr. Singh kind of get more into this, but my understanding is this would be a way, I guess we could talk about who it would apply to, but my guess would be ORP members that are full-time faculty to transition into full retirement while continuing to provide a service to the institution. And there would be a time period as to how they step down their teaching load or whatever it may be. So 1 year you step down to, you take a 25% decrease in pay, you provide 70% of your teaching load, and you're able to receive a agreed upon retirement benefit amount, something like that. But Dr. Singh, I'll let you go into this more.
So I think it was a slightly an idea on the outlier side, where the goal was to increase the retention of not only the junior faculty, which we have addressed a lot of issues, but the senior faculty members. And we have various cases where we have very bright scholars, internationally recognized scholars who are in the university systems, and once they turn 60, 65 or 70, they just leave the state. They just go away from the state. I think that's something which we should try to stop. That is one thing. So the second issue is about, given that we still rank pretty low, both with ORP and DB contributions all across the nation, it can give some sort of an opportunity to employees who are senior to transition into new career paths. If they have reduced load with the universities, then probably they can try to see like whether what kind of career they want to pursue once they're retiring. Gives them a nicer transition phase once they retire.
And that benefits the university and the state because they stay here doing that rather than trying to transition by moving to another state, another opportunity.
I think the third issue, which I'm sorry if I don't want to offend anyone, but like that is certainly true that in various departments, which we see even in LSU and we recognize there is a deadwood. Like there are faculty members who will be 80, 85 years old. They are not retiring just because they don't have options. They cannot afford to retire. They have never explored an alternate transitionary career path and so on. So many universities have ran pilot programs on this phased retirement. They have run it successfully. There are many good universities. I think like we can probably take a lead on this in the certain universities to think about it, whether we want to do it, how do we want to do it. It is a very forward-looking idea in some way that where we give options, it will be voluntary. People, and I think like we have seen in many universities where they have implemented this, there is still an option that, okay, I've done it for 2 years. I don't want to pursue it further. I want to go back to my full job and so on. It's kind of, no one writes the final words till the very last semester or something that you are going to retire. The other benefit is, like for us, like TRSL will have more predictive power now. That well, these are the people who have submitted these partial retirement or phased retirement the next 4 or 5 years, so we can predict the situation better. So I think probably it's complex to achieve, but it has a lot of benefits if we can at least have more rigorous study on this.
I have a question, and I know we talked about it, but I didn't think to ask this before. In a phased retirement model, let's say I'm going into phased retirement and I'm going to reduce my pay to 75%, reduce my workload to 75%, and presumably then reduce my contribution for those years to retirement to 75%. But would anything change on the retirement side? Would these people begin to tap into their retirement funds or no?
I think it depends from system to system.
Yeah.
So
Can,
Matt sent me some links to some universities that have this type of program. Problem for me is the information's on the system's website. I can't really find a lot retirement side of how they handle things. So I'm sure there's a way to do it. It looked like from they're all different. Some of them said you could take money from the ORP, but if you were in the DB, you couldn't. Some of them said you could take it from both. I think one of them I looked at sort of treated like a rehired retiree under the DB plan. So there's no set way to do it. I'm sure there's a way that figure it out. Probably, Kenny, you probably need to weigh in some if it was gonna be part of the DB.
Yeah, that's my first question. Is it ORP specific, or is this, you're trying to put this in the DB plan? Because I would assume you have break and service issues for the DB plan. And then
Yes and no. So under federal law, you can't have in-service. There are certain instances where you can allow in-service distributions, but the plan has to allow for it. Ours doesn't. But there are places that allow it. So
May
find a way to do it.
may I add, there's one thing that hasn't been said yet. If we are, and I appreciate the retention of our older faculty as well. One of our greatest benefits still in this state, even though we've had such flux of raises and such, one of our greatest benefits is after we retire, we still maintain our health care. However, if you get rehired, you lose that opportunity, right? Not misspoken. If I go and take a new job, don't I lose my?
Your OGB benefits stays with you as where you retire. You don't lose it.
But if I hired by another company or another job, do I lose my?
You have to physically retire
You're a retiree to keep it. You have to be active or retired.
Right, so I'm no longer retired. If I take another job, I will lose my health benefits.
If you
under
leave the
system.
state, I mean, you're taking another job in industry.
Anywhere. So like, a good example is we have had faculty in the past who have retired. And then unbeknownst to themselves, not educated enough to realize, they get rehired as an adjunct and lose their
No, they
health
don't-
benefits.
They don't lose their health benefits.
This was about a decade ago. They lost their benefits. I promise you this.
They
But
made a
this,
decision somewhere along the way that they
this-
shouldn't have.
this.
I think that's more on the employee, not the employer.
This opportunity, is a great way. Irrespective of, do I wanna tap into my financial pot and, you know, invest in other directions? A phased opportunity in whoever we are for ORP or DB is a great opportunity to maintain our senior faculty who have great expertise and have great value to the state and to the institutions, but don't have the wherewithal or the want to take 12, 15 credit hours. They'll take their 6, 9, and it would be a tremendous, and then if they are paid a reduced amount, then the university, most likely, they're on the highest salary base anyway, so the university will be saving a few dollars by having this most senior person getting paid a smaller paycheck. So there's a tremendous value to this. It has nothing even to do with let me tap into my retirement, you know, and refinance my winnings, if you will. It's just simply, it's good math for the universities.
And then
It's
the
just-
tapping into the retirement might not be a portion of this. I was
Yeah.
just curious because
Necessary.
it didn't come up, but to the healthcare, if I went into phased retirement or if I retired altogether and had access to the healthcare, but I still want to do some work and I find not community service work, but paid work with one Acadiana or Catholic Charities or something, I'm still retired from the state, so I do get to keep that benefit, correct? Okay.
Absolutely.
So you see, let me give an example. I think for TRSL, it will be really beneficial. So suppose there is a senior faculty member who has a indoor chair or something, he has to travel a lot, he retires. I have a colleague who is actually planning to do that at 60. Says, I have to travel to so many conferences, I have so many invited talks. I have to miss so many classes, I have no option, I have to just retire. And he's in TRSL. But if there is an option like this, that you can have a 3 or 4 years of phased retirement, I'm pretty sure many of these senior indoor chairs will probably jump on that ship. And you're completely right, they are the highest, they are the cream of every university system. They'll be ready to give away some of their salary for this flexibility. And TRSL will actually gain in that because they get those extra years from them in their system. So I think it has lots of benefits. It will be good. I know we have very little time to explore all of these benefits. Maybe at least if we can make a recommendation for a study.
Resolution,
Yeah.
you do it
Like-
study resolution.
Yeah, there's a lot more to this, because
Yeah.
if you have somebody that goes below that 75%, they can't keep their benefit. So like you really have some triggers you've got to look at that's way beyond just the retirement piece.
So the recommendation would be to request a resolution to study what this may look like.
Who is gonna do this study?
Well, I don't know.
Sounds like a task.
Well,
I think so.
but
Really appreciate
OGB
that, Gina.
has to be a part of this.
Yes.
Teachers has to be a part of this.
Eligibility, some of the eligibility is based on each institution. I think we get to determine what full-time is. So I think there may be some flexibility in the law of what full-time is.
That is true, because we all choose 75%, but some people have a higher percent than we do.
But I open it up for recommendations as to who would. And would this just be faculty is where we want to go with this, or?
I would think so at first. Because then you get in the slippery slope of, you know, part-time employees and auxiliary offices that maybe you don't want to have, and
This whole idea is to keep our senior faculty
So it'd be like,
engaged in the university with less of a annual evaluation requirement over their head.
you would want it to be someone who has been promoted to the rank of professor.
Not necessarily,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be.
Okay,
I mean, because you can be an assistant or associate professor, you can be an instructor for 35 years, but you still have a valuable role
Okay.
in your
You have to
institution.
be in faculty status.
Yes.
okay.
And I do want to mention, just because this is my area of expertise, if with endowments, you would relinquish the endowment position when you go below 100%, when you go to part-time.
Okay.
Which would relinquish part of your remuneration in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But I think from our standpoint, we would need to see what is going to be proposed as the overall phased retirement plan, and then see how we can work that into TRSL, what changes we would need. So I think we need to know ahead of time what program it's gonna look like, or what they want it to look like. And then from there, we can start to look at
I think that'd be part of the study though, wouldn't it? Like, if we propose a recommendation for faculty members to go into a phased retirement, EBO or ORP. Like, cause I don't know if we just singled out ORP, if that, I mean, I'm sure that's the easier one in terms of, you know, figuring it out, but are you,
It would need to be both.
I think it would have to be both.
If you do a feasibility study, it would need to be both. I mean, the idea would be to retain our skill set in our campuses and in our state. It has to be both.
I guess my thing is, what would you want the DB piece to look like? You're allowed to do it, but would you still contribute and earn more service credit? Would you?
I don't know.
Person retire and be
I think
treated as
that's
a
part of the
retirement
study.
year?
To see how that all looks. Like, there's, I mean, I don't know if we could make that decision now. It's just
Yeah.
a study of what that could look like.
And if I give you an example, maybe you went to a percentage and the faculty member, the individual, wouldn't really matter to them that they weren't physically contributing from, in the university match, but they were still employed. And they could do it on their own, right? They could have personal. The difference is to say, if I'm a salaried individual versus an adjunct, maybe getting a single price point for a class, the values are tremendously different. Yes, they may not want to even go that route if they lose their health benefits or their opportunities. So it is a total feasibility study. I mean, it would be hard to say what it would look like without really looking at the nuts and bolts. But there's probably plenty of individuals that I know, if I still had the opportunity to go into the building, teach a 60% load and do exactly what my expertise are, and I can still contribute. And when I'm talking expertise, I'm talking the upper division, the graduate classes, the stuff that's not just, English 101 kind of stuff. Or maybe they're just an excellent teacher anyway, and that's their vibe. They may not care that they're not still contributing. They might want that opportunity, but just the fact to allow them to still be part of the institution and have play a role in the institution could be good enough. And we would save a lot of people.
We'd save a lot, that'd be
We
a
would
lot,
save a lot of people.
that'd be a lot bigger hole than just, well, you can adjunct a class here and there.
And for, now, I don't know, again, for part-time status, when it comes to SACS accreditation and number of PhDs in your ratios, you have to be over 50% of in your department to be accredited. There's gonna be great value to the institutions to allow this to happen.
But I'll come back to Trey's question, like what will be the procedure to have this study? Should we recommend the formation of committee or a group?
Well, I would think the recommendation would be for House Retirement or whoever to request to put forth a resolution to study this and provide the groups that I think could be a part of it. OGB, TRSL,
HR.
HR, academic affairs. Carrie, would you need a foundation on there or not really? Would that fall under just academic affairs? Okay. Cause there's a lot that goes into this. And then if it's, it's just a recommendation to propose a resolution, so it doesn't have to go anywhere. And I'm sure it comes through. That's where resolutions go. Anything else? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
One of them had emailed you about social security as an option in lieu of
Oh,
TRSL.
yes, okay. And I know, this is,
Like the lasers rule, that's all we were looking for.
yeah, so I'm happy to include that as do you want to just bring that up for
So,
public
okay, so
discussion?
the way it works right now is somebody comes in and let's say they have, I don't know, 10, 15 years in the industry, and we're gonna hire them with greater than 2 years. So we offer them TRSL, ORP. Then we start explaining to them how the social security offset and all that works. They decline our positions because we hire a lot in the industry, right? Because of the business we're in. So we're having a really hard time getting people from the industry to come in and do this with us. They'll even pass up adjunct positions because they don't want to screw themselves up. Whereas if the adjunct position, we could allow them to do social security because that's a whole different situation. But if I'm trying to get them full-time, they'll decline it. So to give them the option that if they have so many years in social security already at a certain age, just like Lasers has their resolution, I think it's 55 maybe, they could choose social security instead of TRSL or ORP. And then they don't have to worry about all that time that they had in social security and in private industry.
Trey, any thoughts on that?
So
It would be a
so the
small
way it
subset.
works at Lasers is it makes membership in the system optional for people now. I don't remember what the requirement is, but
It's 55.
so if you hire that person, they don't have to be in the system. So it would just be a change to TRSL's statutes, because right now you're required to be in, so it would be making a certain group of people, making TRSL membership optional for whatever criteria you wanted to use.
I would just match what Lasers has, just so that we can do the same thing.
How does everybody feel about that?
Sounds good to me.
I think it's a good idea. Okay, we'll put it in there. Why not? We got rid of enough, we can add one more.
The biggest population coming back into the workforce right now is age 60, so that is a untapped potential, I think.
Right.
Especially since
So,
we're
like, they were talking about-
recruitment and retention.
Yeah, and they were talking about keeping faculty. This is about keeping like people that have great administrative experience that could come in and help.
And also which would obviously be a larger pot. But we have also individuals who would say they get burnt out as a physician. And they want to come in and, teach 200 level anatomies. And if you can, now they're doing that not because you want to make the money, they're doing that for the love of being in the classroom. But there are people that will come from career paths industry and have those expertise in the classroom. Which actually benefits everybody, right? The students, everybody needs those people.
I like it. Any other recommendations that we want to bring up? Oh,
So
yep.
Dr. Arbuthnot is not here and she sent me something.
Okay.
I would just read what she wrote to me. So she wanted that I should address this as her potential recommendation. She says, I strongly believe we should address current retention issues for those with 15+ years in ORP. This group is at a critical career stage, and the current version of transition to TRSL presents certain risks for them. I suggest that we propose a task force recommendation allowing employees with 15 or more years to purchase or buy years of service at an agreed upon actuarial rate. This option would enhance retention of current employees. While I support the other recommendations such as 7-year window, I believe they are primarily focused on recruiting new hires. But this recommendation would help those who are in the mid-career stage. So I'm not sure how viable this is, but at least if we can get some thoughts from Ken and Trey.
So that would have a cost to the system. our board has traditionally opposed anything that allowed a purchase, so. Last year's ORP bill that allows the transition, we did not oppose because that was not in it. But any proposal in the past that had that in it, we opposed it based on the cost to the system. Kenny can probably explain more, but we will never calculate the cost correctly, so. And only the people that think it would benefit them are going to do it, and so. It will have a cost to us. I don't know if it's anything we can calculate, but.
Okay, yeah, so I didn't quite understand when you mentioned it earlier, but I have a better sense. So you're talking about people who are currently employed ORP members who want to transition to the DB plan and have 15 or more years of employment, basically. So the reason the bill was structured the way it was, that says you come into the DB plan, you start over. Because prior bills have said, if we bring you over, then you bring all your contributions and you get service back to whatever date. That's a huge cost. That's where the cost comes from. And if you recall my presentation that compared the ORP versus the DB, the way in which TRSL calculates the present value of the benefit that you need to pay in order to purchase service, essentially, they're not, it's extremely beneficial and advantageous to the employee. So I can't imagine it. I am in the process, I came into lasers mid-career, right? I am about to figure out what is it that I need to do to purchase airtime when I hit 5 years. Because it just makes sense for me to get as much as I possibly excuse me, as I possibly can, because it's so much cheaper than I could buy that annuity on the open market. And that's exactly what you're talking about right here. This is going to be someone who has 15 years of service, or so they're going to be in potentially their mid-30s to mid-40s. That's it's going to be extremely cheap for them to come in, particularly if they can bring their ORP money over. So they've got the pot of money sitting there, right? Versus having to pull it out of their savings or whatever and come up with a big pile of cash. That is going to be a big cost to the retirement system. And so that is the group. I mean, later service employees are some cost, but they're so much closer to retirement. You have a much better idea of how much they're ultimately going to cost. It's those people who are mid-career who it's harder to predict what's actually going to occur. They have a lot longer period of time for their pay to increase more than you anticipate. And so, and the way in which this calculation occurs, it's really kind of almost a sweet spot for those individuals where the cost to the system is significantly more, the risk to the system is significantly more. So I think we would probably look at a couple of examples and be able to put some dollar value, and it's not going to look pretty. It's going to look very expensive.
Anybody else on discussion of these? All right, so we'll get a draft report together to send out next week to everybody in preparation for 2 weeks from now, which should be our last meeting, to where we'll have a final report to review and approve, and then send on to House Retirement to complete the resolution's work. And so, Siri, I don't think there's any other business, but I open it up if there is. All right, future meeting date, Wednesday, December 18th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Batteries aren't working, got it. And with that, I welcome a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right, a second, all right. Perfect. Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. A full 2 hours.